You must be hungry. Eat something, my dear.
The Korean grandmother's hands were warm as she pressed the bowl of soup into Jenny's frozen fingers. Eat, eat, she insisted, her smile reminding Jenny of Sunday dinners back home. Jenny had just started to relax when she heard footsteps behind her, measured, purposeful, expensive shoes on tile floor. Then she heard his voice. That voice. Deep, controlled, speaking Korean to his grandmother with affection she wouldn't have believed possible 3 days ago. Jenny's entire body went rigid. She should have turned around right then. Should have made some excuse, thanked the grandmother, and run. But something kept her frozen in that chair, maybe denial, maybe shock, maybe the terrible certainty that running would only make things worse. Have you ever realized you've walked straight into the one place you should never be? That's what happened to Jenny in that moment. Before we go any further, if you're already hooked on this story, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me if Jenny should run or stay. And don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Now, let me tell you how accepting help from a kind stranger became the most dangerous decision of Jenny's life. For hours earlier, Jenny had been perfectly content with her Tuesday evening shoot. She was 29, a freelance photographer from Atlanta, and Seoul had been good to her during this 6-month assignment. The city's hidden neighborhoods fed her artistic soul, and she'd been documenting everything from back-alley restaurants to traditional hanok houses tucked between modern buildings for her hidden soul portfolio. The golden hour light had been perfect. She'd found this tiny restaurant in a neighborhood she'd never been to before, the kind of place where steam rose from pots and elderly women hand-rolled dumplings in the window. Her camera loved it. She'd gotten so absorbed in the shots that she hadn't noticed her phone dying. Hadn't noticed the sun setting. Hadn't noticed the temperature dropping. By the time she packed up her equipment, the neighborhood had transformed. The street signs were all in Korean, no English translations like in the tourist areas. Her phone was completely dead. She didn't recognize a single landmark, and she'd taken so many turns following the light that she had no idea which subway station she'd emerged from. Jenny pulled her jacket tighter as her breath became visible in the cold air. Her camera bag felt twice as heavy now. She'd been walking for 20 minutes, and every street looked the same. The few people she'd tried to ask for directions had either not spoken English or had hurried past, uncomfortable with the foreign woman who was clearly lost. That's when she saw her. An elderly Korean woman, maybe early 80s, wearing a cream-colored cardigan over traditional-looking clothing. The woman had stopped on the sidewalk, staring at Jenny with unmistakable concern. She said something in Korean, her tone worried, and pointed at Jenny's jacket, clearly not warm enough for a Seoul winter evening. "I'm okay," Jenny tried to explain, miming being fine, though she was shivering. "Just lost." Lost. She pulled out her dead phone helplessly. The grandmother, because she had that universal grandmother energy, shook her head disapprovingly and said something firm in Korean. Then she gently took Jenny's arm and started walking, gesturing for her to follow. Jenny hesitated. Everything she'd learned about stranger danger, about being a woman alone in a foreign country, told her this was a bad idea. But the woman's grip was insistent and somehow comforting. And truthfully? Jenny was exhausted, cold, and genuinely lost. Sometimes you make decisions not because you're smart, but because you're out of better options. The grandmother's home was modest but immaculate, that perfect combination of traditional Korean and modern comfort. The moment they stepped inside, warmth enveloped Jenny like a blanket. The woman immediately pressed house slippers into her hands and started fussing in Korean, disappearing into the kitchen. Jenny stood in the entryway, taking it all in. Family photos lined the walls, graduation pictures, what looked like a wedding, a young boy growing up through the decades. The furniture was simple but quality. Everything was spotlessly clean. The smell of something savory cooking made her stomach growl. She realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast. The grandmother returned with the soup, still talking in Korean as if Jenny could understand every word, her tone warm and scolding in that way only grandmothers can manage. She guided Jenny to sit at a small table near the kitchen, pressed the warm bowl into her hands, and smiled with such genuine kindness that Jenny felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," Jenny said, her voice catching slightly. "Thank you so much. I was so lost, and you," she didn't have the words, but the grandmother seemed to understand, patting her hand and nodding with satisfaction. For the first time in hours, Jenny relaxed. She was safe. She was warm. A kind stranger had saved her from a miserable night wandering Seoul's backstreets. She had no idea that this kind stranger was the grandmother of the most dangerous man she'd ever met. That's when she heard it. A male voice from somewhere deeper in the house, speaking Korean on the phone. The tone was different from the grandmother's warmth, colder, more controlled, commanding. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. Jenny's photographer's instinct kicked in. She'd learned to read people through her lens, to notice details. The expensive watch on the table she hadn't registered before. The way the neighbors had given this house a subtle berth when they'd walked up. The photo on the wall of a young man in a suit that probably cost more than her entire camera setup. The grandmother called out cheerfully toward the voice, and Jenny heard footsteps approaching. Expensive shoes on tile. Measured. Purposeful. "My grandson," the grandmother said in English, clearly proud. "Did he drive you home?" "Very good boy." The kitchen doorway filled with a figure, and Jenny's world tilted. Kim Tae-hyung stood there, shirtless except for visible bandaging wrapped around his ribs, button-down shirt hanging open. The same sharp cheekbones. The same cold, assessing eyes. The same man she'd publicly humiliated 3 days ago at the gallery opening when he'd approached her with that arrogant confidence and she'd loudly called him out in front of Seoul's elite. The same man whose face had been all over her social media feed with captions like "Mystery Woman Destroys Entitled CEO" and "He Picked the Wrong One." Their eyes met. Jenny watched his expression cycle through surprise, recognition, calculation, and finally, something that made her blood run cold, dark amusement. The grandmother, oblivious to the tension thick enough to cut, beamed at them both and said something in Korean, gesturing between them. Tae-hyung's eyes never left Jenny's face as he responded to his grandmother in Korean, his tone warm and respectful, a complete opposite to the dangerous assessment in his eyes. Then he switched to English, and when he spoke, his voice was silk over steel. "Ms. Williams. What an unexpected pleasure." His slight smile didn't reach his eyes. "My grandmother is saying you're lost. How fortunate that you found your way here. To my home." Jenny's throat went completely dry. The soup bowl shook slightly in her hands. She was trapped in a crime lord's kitchen, protected by his grandmother's hospitality, 3 days after making him look weak in front of everyone who mattered in his world. And from the way he was looking at her, he was about to make that her problem. 3 days ago at that gallery opening in Gangnam, she'd been hired to photograph the event for an art magazine, her first real assignment with actual pay. The space had been all marble and glass, filled with Seoul's elite in designer clothes that cost more than her rent. Jenny had been working the room with her camera when he'd appeared beside her. Tall, sharp-featured, wearing a suit that probably cost what she made in 6 months. "The Rothko is better from this angle," he'd said in perfect English, his voice smooth and confident. "Let me show you." His hand had moved toward her lower back, presumptuous, familiar, like her presence there was for his entertainment. Like she was a guest to be charmed rather than a professional doing her job. Something in Jenny had snapped. Maybe it was the long day, maybe it was years of being dismissed in professional spaces, maybe it was just his arrogant assumption that she'd welcome his attention. "Maybe ask before assuming every woman here wants your attention," she'd said loudly, stepping away from his reach. People nearby had turned to look. Arrogant doesn't look good on anyone, regardless of the suit. The room had gone silent. His associates, because she realized now they were associates, not just friends, had frozen mid-conversation. Security cameras mounted in the corners had captured everything. For one long moment, the man had just stared at her, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes before his expression went completely blank. Jenny had walked away feeling vindicated, righteous even. She hadn't seen his face after she turned. Hadn't seen whatever look made his associates exchange nervous glances. By morning, the video was everywhere. Mystery woman puts entitled CEO in his place. He picked the wrong one. Watch this American tourist destroy a cocky Korean businessman. 10 million views and counting. Jenny had felt like a hero. She had no idea she'd just made herself a target. Now, sitting at his grandmother's kitchen table, Jenny watched those same cold eyes lock onto hers. Recognition hit them both simultaneously. Her stomach dropped while something calculating flickered across his face before smoothing into careful blankness. The grandmother continued chattering cheerfully in Korean, completely oblivious to the tension thick enough to choke on. Taehyung's expression cycled through surprise, cold calculation, then transformed into forced pleasantness as he responded to his grandmother in Korean, his tone warm and affectionate. The shift was so seamless it was terrifying. He stepped into the kitchen, buttoning his shirt over the bandaging on his ribs, and the grandmother beamed with pride, gesturing between them and speaking rapidly. "My grandson says you are very welcome here," the grandmother said in careful English, patting Jenny's hand. "I find you lost and cold." "Very cold." "Now warm, yes?" "Yes, thank you so much, but I really should." Jenny started to stand, her hand trembling as she set down the soup bowl. "Please, sit." Taehyung's voice was silk over steel. "Not a request." His grandmother, hearing only politeness, nodded approvingly and launched into what was clearly a story about his childhood, pointing at photos on the wall. Jenny caught fragments. "Very smart boy, always helping Halmiani, such good business." The grandmother insisted Jenny eat while she talked, and Jenny found herself trapped at the table, mechanically lifting the spoon while her mind screamed at her to run. She noticed details now that her photographer's eye should have caught earlier. The watch on the side table, Patek Philippe, worth more than her car. His phone buzzing constantly with notifications he ignored. The way the grandmother's house, modest as it appeared, sat in a neighborhood where other residents had given them subtle space when they'd walked up the street. Taehyung sat across from her, his expression pleasant for his grandmother's benefit, but his eyes never left Jenny's face. Those dark eyes that had gone so cold at the gallery, now watching her like she was a chess piece he was deciding how to play. His phone rang, the tone sharp and insistent. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor shifted, the pleasant grandson mask slipping for just a moment. He said something apologetic to his grandmother in Korean, then switched to English, his voice dropping into something harder, more controlled. "Ms. Williams, would you mind stepping into my office for a moment? There's something we need to discuss about your situation." It wasn't a question. The grandmother smiled encouragingly, clearly thinking her grandson was being helpful. Jenny's throat went dry as Taehyung stood, gesturing toward a hallway that suddenly felt like a trap closing around her. The office had clearly once been a bedroom, childhood drawings still tucked in a frame on one shelf, a faded basketball poster behind the door. But now it held something else entirely. Maps of Seoul covered one wall, certain districts marked in red and blue. Security monitors showed feeds from cameras positioned throughout the neighborhood, angles that captured every approach to the house. A tablet on the desk displayed what looked like business reports, but the numbers were coded in ways that made Jenny's skin crawl. Taehyung closed the door quietly, and suddenly the pleasant mask was gone. His jaw tightened as he turned to face her, and Jenny saw the cold fury he'd been hiding from his grandmother. "You need to understand something, Ms. Williams." His voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. "That video you made? It didn't just embarrass me. In my world, public disrespect equals weakness. And weakness gets people killed." "That's not my fault," Jenny shot back, her own anger rising to mask her fear. "You approached me like I was there for your entertainment. I had every right. 3 of my men were attacked yesterday," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Because rivals think I've gone soft. Because a video of me getting put in my place by an American woman has been viewed 10 million times with captions about how I picked the wrong one." He leaned against the desk, and she noticed how carefully he moved, favoring his injured ribs. "That bandaging you saw? That's from an assassination attempt 2 nights ago. They're testing me, seeing if the rumors are true. Horror crept up Jenny's spine, replacing her defensive anger. I didn't know it would. Of course you didn't know. His tone wasn't accusatory now, just tired. You saw an arrogant man hitting on you and you called him out. In most contexts, that would be the end of it. But my world doesn't work like most contexts. Your world, Jenny repeated slowly, looking at the maps, the security feeds, the coded reports. Understanding crystallized into dread. What exactly do you do, Mr. Kim? My father built an organization through blood and fear. I inherited it. I've been trying to transition it into something less. He paused, choosing his words carefully, violent. But that takes time. And perception. And right now, thanks to your viral moment, my perception is that I'm weak. Before Jenny could respond, his phone exploded with alerts, buzzing, chiming, lighting up with notifications. Taehyung grabbed it, his expression shifting from resignation to alarm as he pulled up the security feeds on the larger monitor. 3 black SUVs were pulling up outside the grandmother's house, moving with practiced precision. His face went pale. They found you. They're here for you. He was already moving, pulling open a drawer, checking something that made Jenny's blood run cold, a gun. And my grandmother just became collateral damage. Get my grandmother to the interior bathroom. Now. Taehyung's voice had transformed into something sharp and commanding. Tell her the heater is broken, you smell gas, anything. Just get her there and keep her calm. Jenny moved on autopilot, finding the grandmother in the kitchen still cleaning dishes. Hermione, please, bathroom, she gestured urgently, pulling gently at the elderly woman's arm. The grandmother's confusion shifted to concern at Jenny's expression, but she followed, asking questions in Korean that Jenny couldn't answer. In the hallway, Jenny heard Taehyung on the phone, his Korean rapid and clipped. Through the bathroom doorway, she watched him move through the house with terrifying efficiency despite his injury, checking window sight lines, pulling curtains, his movements precise and calculated. The wounded man from moments ago had vanished, replaced by something predatory. The doorbell rang. Polite. Almost mocking. Taehyung opened it to reveal 4 men in dark suits, their postures casual but ready. The leader smiled, speaking Korean that even Jenny recognized as false politeness. Taehyung responded, blocking the doorway, his tone conversational but his body language unmistakably territorial. We're looking for the American photographer, the leader said, switching to accented English for Jenny's benefit. Just for conversation. No trouble intended. There's no one here but family, Taehyung replied evenly. The men exchanged glances. We heard your Hermione took in a lost foreign woman. Very kind. Very characteristic. She's always had such a soft heart. It would be unfortunate if that kindness brought complications. Jenny saw Taehyung's hand twitch toward his concealed weapon. The threat to his grandmother had landed exactly as intended. She made a decision that was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. She stepped out of the bathroom and walked toward the door. I'm the one you want. Leave them alone. Everything happened fast. The leader grabbed her arm, yanking her forward. Taehyung moved, precise, brutal, nothing heroic about it. His elbow connected with the man's throat. Another operative lunged, Taehyung blocked, countered, his movements economical despite his injury. Jenny fumbled for her camera, the flash firing directly into an attacker's eyes, buying precious seconds. Then the neighborhood erupted. Men appeared from doorways and alleys, the businessmen who'd been watching all along. The Choi operatives retreated to their vehicles, their leader clutching his throat but smiling. Message received, he called out. We know where your weaknesses are. As the SUVs disappeared, another car arrived. A man emerged, surveying the damage with cold assessment before his gaze locked onto Jenny with pure hatred. He spoke in Korean, his tone venomous. Taehyung responded in English, deliberate. She's under my protection now. grandmother's orders. The man, Minsuk, she'd learn later, smiled without warmth. Then grandmother just signed her death warrant too. Within an hour, the grandmother was packing a small overnight bag, her hands trembling as she touched family photos on her dresser. "Why is this happening?" she asked in halting English, tears in her eyes. "What kind of business do you really do?" Jenny stood in the doorway, watching Taehyung kneel beside his grandmother, his voice gentle in Korean. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone, careful half-truths wrapped in genuine affection. "I have competitors, Halmiani. Dangerous ones. I need to know you're safe." The elderly care facility was luxurious, more like a five-star hotel than a nursing home, but it was still exile from everything familiar. Jenny helped carry the grandmother's bags, feeling the weight of guilt with every step. In the car afterward, the silence was suffocating until Taehyung finally spoke. "In my world, reputation equals territory. Territory equals income. Income equals power to protect the people who matter." He stared out at Seoul's glittering skyline. "That video made me look weak. Rivals are testing boundaries. People will die if I don't restore my image." "I didn't know," Jenny said quietly. "I just saw an arrogant guy hitting on me." "You saw exactly what I wanted everyone to see." His laugh was bitter. "The problem is, I need to appear strong to my enemies but not like my father, not brutal, not indiscriminate. It's a narrow path, and you just pushed me off it." The penthouse took Jenny's breath away, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist luxury that screamed wealth. But it was the security room that made her stomach drop, monitoring systems, weapons in a locked case, maps marking territories in colors she was beginning to understand meant violence and control. He entered carefully, keeping distance. "Your cat is safe. My associate says she's judgmental and food-motivated." The smallest hint of a smile. "Sounds like her owner." Despite everything, Jenny laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "What now?" "Now we negotiate." He sat across from her, maintaining respectful distance. "If you agree to this arrangement, I need you to tell me your terms." Jenny wiped her eyes, her mind shifting into survival mode. "Monthly video calls with your grandmother. Real ones, not supervised performances. My photography work continues with whatever security you need. Complete transparency about threats and plans. An exit strategy when this stabilizes. And compensation, I'm pragmatic enough to admit I need it." Taehyung nodded at each point. "Agreed to everything except the exit timeline. You leave when it's safe, not before. I won't have your death on my conscience." "Fine. I want it in writing." He pulled out his phone, began typing. "I respect that." The media handler arrived an hour later, young me, sharp-eyed and stylish, circling Jenny like a curator evaluating art. "This could actually work," she murmured. "She's beautiful, she's real, and she's already proven she doesn't fear you. That's rare." "Make me the story," Jenny said suddenly. "Not the girlfriend who tamed him. The woman who wasn't impressed by money or power and made him earn respect." "That's actually interesting." Taehyung's eyebrows rose slightly. Youngmi grinned. "She's smart. I like her." When Youngmi suggested a complete wardrobe overhaul, Jenny pushed back. "I'm a photographer, not a trophy. I dress like myself or this doesn't work." Taehyung watched the exchange from across the room, and Jenny caught the smallest smile of grudging respect. That night, unable to sleep, Jenny found him on the penthouse balcony tending his injury. They talked quietly about loneliness and cages, different kinds, same bars. His phone buzzed. A message from Minsuk with a surveillance photo of them on the balcony, caption, "If this is performance, it's convincing. If it's real, we have a problem." The care facility smelled of antiseptic and expensive flowers. The grandmother's room was small but personalized, family photos covering every surface, a traditional Korean quilt folded at the foot of the bed. When she saw Jenny, her entire face lit up. "You came." She grabbed Jenny's hands, pulling her close, speaking rapid Korean before switching to English. I tell all the nurses about my grandson's beautiful girlfriend. Jenny's stomach twisted with guilt as she smiled and nodded, maintaining the fiction that was keeping this woman's final months peaceful. The grandmother showed her everything, photos of Taehyung as a child, gap-toothed and grinning. Then she pulled out a folder of drawings, carefully preserved. He wanted to be architect, she said softly, showing Jenny sketches of buildings with gardens woven through them, people walking together in green spaces. Build things that made people happy. But his father. She trailed off, her expression darkening. Difficult man. Hard business. During their garden walk, the grandmother tired quickly, leaning heavily on Jenny's arm. A nurse appeared with medications, too many bottles for simple old age. The doctor's visit scheduled on the wall calendar read oncology follow-up. 6 months, maybe less. Take care of my grandson, the grandmother said as they said goodbye, her grip surprisingly strong. He pretends to be hard, but he's scared too. You look at him like you see the person, not the prince. That's good. In the car ride back, Jenny stayed silent, processing everything. When they reached the penthouse, she found Taehyung on the rooftop, smoking, a rare vulnerability. The Seoul skyline glittered behind him. She's dying, Jenny said quietly. He didn't turn around. 6 months, maybe less. I won't let her die knowing what I've become. She raised you? After my mother left. She's why I haven't. He stopped, but Jenny understood. His grandmother was the only thing keeping him from becoming his father completely. My father built an empire with blood. Grandmother thinks I run a legitimate company. I've spent 10 years trying to transition out of violence, to build something different. But you can't just leave this world. It doesn't work that way. That evening, they entered the restaurant together, Seoul's elite watching, cameras flashing. Min-suk sat at a corner table, evaluating. Across the room, someone Jenny recognized from the attack, Choi Syndicate. Taehyung's hand rested on her back, gentle but possessive. She leaned into it, and wasn't entirely sure anymore if it was performance. When he pulled out her chair and whispered, "Thank you for today." For her, something shifted in her chest. A waiter approached with a message on a silver tray. Taehyung read it, his expression darkening. Grandmother had a fall. She's asking for you both. The hospital's fluorescent lighting was unforgiving, washing out everything except the fear on their faces. The grandmother's fall hadn't been serious, a dizzy spell, a bruised hip, but it revealed how fragile she'd become. They sat on either side of her bed, each holding one of her hands. Good you have each other, she murmured, half-conscious from pain medication. Don't be alone like I was. Jenny and Taehyung's eyes met over the hospital bed. For a moment, the performance fell away entirely, replaced by something neither of them was ready to name. By morning, media had gathered outside. Photos of them in the waiting room, her head on his shoulder, their hands intertwined, were already circulating. Young Mi called, her voice bright with professional satisfaction. These photos are perfect. Raw, real, emotional. Exactly what we needed. But it hadn't been staged. That was what terrified Jenny. When the grandmother stabilized and insisted they go home and rest, Jenny made it to the penthouse elevator before she broke. The stress, the fear, the impossible weight of maintaining fiction while feeling something devastatingly real, it all crashed over her at once. Taehyung pulled her against him without thinking, his hand cradling the back of her head while she cried into his shirt. They stood like that, the elevator forgotten, until her breathing steadied. When she looked up, his face was inches from hers. The almost kiss was electric, leaning in, stopping, the charged space between them heavy with everything they couldn't say. Both pulled back simultaneously. In the penthouse, exhausted and with all guards down, they sat on opposite ends of the couch and finally told the truth. If circumstances were different, Taehyung said quietly, if I were different. But you're not. Jenny's voice was gentle but firm. And I can't unsee what your world requires. I know. He looked at her with something like grief. But I wish. The door burst open. Min-suk stood there, his expression dark. While you were playing house at the hospital, Choi Syndicate seized 2 territory blocks and approached 3 of your business owners. They're calling you the CEO who fell in love like it's a weakness. We need to respond with force, tonight, or we lose everything. How many casualties? Taehyung's voice was flat. Does it matter? Yes. Jenny stood in the doorway, her voice steady. It does. Min-suk turned to her, his contempt naked. This is why you don't belong here. In our world, sentiment is suicide. He looked back at Taehyung. Your father would have already burned their operations to the ground. What are you? The question hung in the air, prove strength through violence, or remain the man his grandmother believed he was. I'm going to that meeting, Jenny said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Taehyung turned from the penthouse war room where his people were gathering, maps spread across tables, phones buzzing constantly, the organized chaos of preparing for potential violence. Absolutely not. If I'm supposedly the reason for all this, I should be there. Your rivals think you're compromised because of me. Use it. His jaw tightened, but she saw the calculation in his eyes. After a long moment, he nodded. You stay behind me. You don't speak unless I signal. If shooting starts, you run. They fitted her with a tracking device and panic button. In the car, Jenny's hand shook despite her determined expression. Taehyung noticed but said nothing, his own tension radiating through the confined space. The warehouse was exactly what she'd expected, industrial, neutral, every entrance monitored. The ritualized pat-down felt invasive and humiliating, but Jenny kept her expression blank. Inside, 2 groups of armed men faced each other across a concrete floor that had probably seen blood before. The Choi leader was older, his face weathered by decades of violence. Your father and I did business through strength. You've gone soft, Kim Taehyung. I'm proposing a different kind of strength, Taehyung replied evenly. Shared territory, profit split, maintained peace. We both win. Choi smiled without warmth. Prove you're not compromised. Give us the woman. The silence was absolute. Every gun in the room became suddenly, terrifyingly relevant. Jenny felt Taehyung's entire body go rigid beside her. She stepped forward before she could think better of it. Every weapon shifted toward her. From the corner of her eye, she saw Taehyung's barely controlled terror. You think control is making people fear you, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He knows it's making them choose you. That's why you're here negotiating instead of already dead. Choi stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, genuine, surprised. Your father would have had her killed for that audacity. He looked at Taehyung with something like respect. Fine. We have a deal. For now. Leaving the warehouse, Min-suk's voice was cold. You should have let me handle this my way. Back at the penthouse, the argument exploded. You had no right to risk yourself like that. You don't get to decide what risks I take. The kiss happened before either of them made a conscious choice, urgent, messy, all pretense abandoned. His hands in her hair, her fingers clutching his jacket, months of tension finally breaking. His phone rang. The care facility. The director's voice was shaking. Mr. Kim, your grandmother isn't in her room. Security footage shows 3 men in orderly uniforms 2 hours ago. They had proper credentials. Taehyung's face went blank. Jenny's voice was quiet. Min-suk stayed at the warehouse. He had time. He wouldn't. She's his grandmother too. But they both knew he would. The penthouse transformed into a war room within minutes. Taehyung was on 3 phones simultaneously, calling every loyal member of his organization, activating every tracking resource. Jenny stood frozen, useless, until something clicked in her photographer's brain. Wait. She grabbed her laptop, pulling up her portfolio. I photographed that warehouse district last month. Every building, every angle. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, marking locations. This one has blind spots on the south entrance. This one shares a ventilation system. Security cameras here, here, and here. Taehyung stopped mid-conversation, staring at her tactical map. His expression shifted. She wasn't a civilian to protect anymore. She was an asset. Minsuk's message arrived, she's safe. For now. We need to talk about the organization's future. The demand was simple. Taehyung steps down. Minsuk takes control. Return to the father's methods, blood and fear. So it's your organization or your grandmother, Jenny said quietly. There's no choice. Taehyung's voice was hollow. There's a third option. We get her back and deal with Minsuk. He looked at her like she'd offered him oxygen in a vacuum. You don't have to do this. You can leave now. Your grandmother took me in when I was lost. Jenny's voice was steel. I'm not leaving her. The infiltration was surgical. Jenny's knowledge of photo angles let them avoid cameras, slip through blind spots she'd documented while chasing light. She stayed in the van with tech support, guiding them through her mental map of the district. They found the grandmother in an industrial office, scared but defiant. Minsuk stood guard, 3 loyalists with him. You were such a sweet boy, the grandmother said to Minsuk, her voice breaking. What happened to you? I'm saving what your son built, Minsuk replied coldly. Taehyung appeared in the doorway. My father built a prison. I'm building something that lasts. The fight was brutal, not choreographed heroics but desperate violence. When Minsuk got the upper hand, slamming Taehyung against a wall, Jenny made her choice. She didn't stay in the van. She ran in, camera flash firing directly into Minsuk's eyes, buying Taehyung the seconds he needed. Afterward, Minsuk was subdued but unrepentant. The grandmother was safe but shaken. The organization was fractured down the middle. At the hospital, while doctors checked the grandmother, Taehyung turned to Jenny. I couldn't have done this without you. You're remarkable. Before Jenny could respond, the grandmother called them over. Her eyes were clear, serious. I need to tell you both something. I'm not a stupid old woman. I know what kind of business my son built. I know what you inherited. She looked at Jenny. And I know, you're real, aren't you? This isn't an arrangement. You chose each other. They exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them. Youngmi burst through the door, her face pale. We have a problem. Someone leaked everything. The fake relationship, the arrangement, the threats. She held up her phone. The headline read, Crime Lord's fake girlfriend, complete con exposed. The media firestorm consumed everything. Every outlet ran variations of the same story, Crime Lord's fake girlfriend exposed. Jenny was called a paid actress, Taehyung mocked for his staged redemption. The Choi Syndicate moved immediately, sensing blood in the water. In the grandmother's hospital room, the 3 of them sat in heavy silence. Finally, the grandmother spoke. Was it fake? Jenny and Taehyung exchanged glances. It started as an arrangement, Jenny admitted. But it became real, Taehyung finished. The grandmother's eyes were sharp despite her frailty. Then tell the truth. Truth is the only thing with power. Youngmi thought they were committing suicide. A press conference admitting everything? Minsuk's allies will use this as proof you're compromised. But Jenny saw it differently. The story isn't crime lord and fake girlfriend. It's 2 people from different worlds choosing each other despite impossible odds. That's actually compelling. The press conference was brutal. Cameras flashing, questions hostile, every word scrutinized. Taehyung spoke first, acknowledging his family's history, his attempt to transform the organization, the arrangement that became something more. Jenny followed, her voice steady. I judged him in 30 seconds at a gallery. Made him viral entertainment. I didn't understand the consequences. But when I learned what my actions had caused, I had a choice: run, or stay, and try to fix it. I stayed. And somewhere in the chaos, something real happened. A reporter called out, "Ms. Williams, are you with him for money?" "I'm with him because he's trying to be better than his legacy." "That's harder than being good to begin with." That night, the Choi Syndicate tested them, attacking one of Taehyung's businesses. But something unexpected happened. Both loyal members and former Minsuk allies showed up to defend it. The organization had found shared purpose beyond fear. 6 months later, they stood at Jenny's photography exhibition, Seoul Underground, Stories of Transformation. The grandmother had passed peacefully 3 weeks earlier, knowing the truth and giving her blessing. Taehyung stood beside Jenny as she looked at her photos of the city's hidden places, the neighborhoods where her journey began, the grandmother's modest home, the faces of people choosing hope over fear. His hand found hers. No regrets? Jenny thought about the scared photographer who'd gotten lost in Seoul, about soup in a stranger's kitchen, about choosing to stay when she could have run. Not one. Thank you for watching this video to the end. I'm sure you enjoyed it.